Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous Hour. My name's Dave, forever an alcoholic. Before we start, Billy, we do it every week, but I'm going to thank you again for yourself.
Oh, that's all right.
I know. But we're so grateful for giving us this opportunity.
No, it's a pleasure.
So we're shortly going to be introducing one of our members who are going to share their story with us. But before I do that, I'd like to ask Dec to read the preamble, which is something we read at the start of every meeting, which basically tells you very simply what AA is, what it does, and I guess what it doesn't do. Dec, over to you.
Cheers, Dave. I'm Dec, and I'm an alcoholic, and this is the AA Preamble. Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength and hope with each other that they may solve the common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for AA membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organisation or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety.
Thanks, Dec. That's great. And can we now get our guests to introduce themselves this morning, please? Or this evening, even.
Good evening. My name's Marcus. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Marcus.
Welcome, Marcus.
Thanks for coming along, mate, to share your experience, strength and hope with us. Really appreciate it. Good. Could you start us off by giving us some idea about your background, your family life, where you're from, all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. I'm from Starbridge originally. I was born in Old Swinford. And I've remained around the Starbridge area. Attend AA meetings where I can, really. I kind of around Kidderminster, around Starbridge, around Edgbaston, and around, I pushed outside towards Birmingham to do some meetings as well. I was born in Old Swinford Hospital. I've got my mum and dad both never really had a problem with alcohol, as far as I'm aware, and I tried to do some research into that over the years. My grandfather died when he was 51, and I was intent on proving that he had died from alcoholism or something, because I wanted a reason, and I also wanted something to identify with, really. I've got a brother, again, no problems with alcohol. So yeah, from an early age, I just remember being very anxious as a kid through primary school. I always remember the early days of primary school. My best mate was he was really good at football, and I remember that when we got asked to separate to be on the football team and stuff like that, I remember the teacher telling me that I needed to go onto the other pitch with the crapper kids, you know. And that was my first feeling.
Character building and stuff like that.
Yeah. I think that was my first feeling of like some kind of inferiority, you know. And because he was my mate, I wanted to be wherever he went. Yeah. And he progressed to kind of like captain of the school, captain of the county, and all that stuff.
He's a silly mate.
Funny enough, he is. He is. We still got a friendship, like 40, 45, 44 years on, whatever it is, do you know?
Lovely.
And I remember him rocked up one day in this pristine Aston Villa away kit. And I'm still envious of it, even though I hate Aston Villa.
Ooh, can you say that?
Yeah. Get over here, cool.
I think they've got a vacancy.
The Boyles.
They have got a vacancy, yeah. I won't be taking it. And and even, I suppose, even as a kid, it was like, I'm gonna follow Aston Villa because my mate follows Aston Villa, and it was all about, even in those early days of like making choices that weren't based on my own. Do you know, they were because somebody else was doing it. Yeah. And that thread progressed to quite a few years on, do you know, into my teenage life, into my adolescent life, into my adult world, really. And I share this sometimes, that there was a kid at school, and when we were young, I always remember, and the teacher saying, "What do you want to be? What do you want to be?" And at that age, it was like no one had a clue, except for this one lad. I'll just call him Richard. And Richard said, "I want to be a brain surgeon." And we thought, well, that's ambitious, you know. And I suppose we laughed, because at that age, you're never going to be that, you know. I remember years later, I bumped into Richard in. He was doing pizza deliveries, in Brierley Hill. And I said to him, "Oh, what you doing there then, Richard?" And he goes, "I'm training to be a brain surgeon. I'm doing this as a job, like just to get some money." And lo and behold, Richard is now like a brain surgeon down in London somewhere.
Wow,
So
there you go.
it just shows you can follow your ambition if you've got one.
So, in your home life, mum and dad drinkers? Were you surrounded by alcohol? And you mentioned your granddad, but was
No.
no.
Never, no. My dad was a pretend drinker. Really, he used to drink man's brown ale, which was about 2.8%, I think, if I remember.
Well, they all were in them days, weren't they?
And it was, I think it was that there was never. They used to keep spirits in the cupboard, in one of those wonderful 1970s kind of Formica,
Yeah.
you know, and there was always Advocaat, which nobody ever touched, and there was the sherry and everything. And I remember we came home from school once, and we got to about the age of 12, 13, and alcohol wasn't really present. Well, it wasn't present in my life at all up until that point. And I remember we got sent home from school once because there were teacher strikes on, and when we got, me and my mate, the Aston Villa club captain guru, we decided it'd be a good idea if we just tried a bit. So we mixed a bit up, and I liked the sensation of what it did. But I noticed that little score marks used to appear on the labels of the bottles. And I thought for years and years and years that my mum and my dad used to do it to keep a tab on how much they were drinking. Because it never seemed to go down, except for when me and my mate had some. And it was about 3 years into recovery. They had a conversation with my mum. And my mum said, "Well, no, we did that because we were worried how much you were drinking." And they were keeping tabs on me back then, do you know. And so that for me, like my granddad, they never used to drink. The sherry used to come out at Christmas. The shandy bass, promoted up to Carlin, do you know. And me and my brother used to joke, like, "We'll never get pissed round here at Christmas," do you know, on Carlin. And it was always
Drunk, you mean?
yeah. Drunk, yeah. Of course.
Well, there you have.
So yeah, that was.
So that was at the age. So Advocaat, my goodness me.
Advocaat.
So you were 12, 13. Was that the start of your drinking?
I'd say that that feeling of knowing how it makes you feel, that warm feeling and feeling like you can't. It takes away the anxiety. It takes away the fear. Because I remember praying as a kid to take away this feeling of panic, this feeling of why am I scared all the time? And I'm not a deeply religious person, and I've found more about religion through coming to AA, to be honest. And the whole aspect, you know, I was baptised, but my mum and dad never pushed me into anything. I found with my mum and my dad that they were always very supportive, like materialistically, and they'd always. But I never really felt supported in my life, you know, understood or asked questions, or really kind of like, what do you want to do, Marcus? What do you want to do after school? What do you want to do? And the whole social aspect, the social network, and I suppose having a child now myself is kind of like, I understand the importance of having that network that you try and push. I try and push him into, because I don't want him to be isolated. I don't want him to suppress. Because I found when I started bunking off school, I used to take time off school and I'd go and hide away somewhere in this kind of there'd be this place down by the river, and I'd go down there and I'd sit there all day until school time had ended. Then I'd end up going back home, do you know. And my mum and dad never knew any of the wiser, do you know. And it was I remember it being a very lonely, very confusing time where I felt like there was nobody to talk to. My first experiences of talking to someone about how I was feeling was I went to college, because my friend again wanted to go to college, and I was still doing everything that he was doing. I didn't take certain options at school that I was good at. And I remember getting a rollicking off the French teacher, because I was quite good at French, and she wanted to know why I hadn't taken it. And again, I'd just taken things because
your mate did.
Yeah, because my mate did. And secondary school, I remember feeling like almost verbally bullied more than anything else. Never physically bullied, but verbally, and I felt really small. I felt not good enough in anything I did. And so the subjects I was good at, I started to bunk off quite a lot. I managed to get through school with, some good qualifications, but not as good as what I could have got, really. And it was all about just being peer-led. And then there was always this fear of the opposite sex. There's always a fear, I never felt good enough. And I always felt like people were taking the mick a little bit, and I felt very judged. And when I got to college, I just remember that feeling came back from like 13, 14 years old, being at school and taking that drink at home, of like, we had to do this oral presentation, and I remember just being scared to death of doing it and thinking, well, I've got to get through it. So what shall I do? So I remember getting off the bus and getting some whiskey and drinking the whiskey.
Oh, I'd give you a bit of
yeah,
Dutch courage.
Yeah. But like you learn years later. I remember somebody in a meeting in Bridgenorth saying about, alcohol was my medicine, but I always took the wrong dosage. And it was about that with the whiskey. I drank it, not really understanding the power of it, and I don't really remember anything else after. I never went to that lesson again at college, because again there was that fear of, what do people think of me? And the fear stayed with me for such a long time, and the anxiety did. I suppose as I got older, I started to find a bit of identity, and the identity, like, I know it's hard to believe now, but I did used to have long blonde hair and no beard, and so there was almost this kind of like surf dude kind of identity thing going on. And when you start to feel like, then you become attracted to the opposite sex, and you start to notice that, oh, girls actually like you, kind of thing. And looking back on it now, I mean, I suppose it felt natural at the time, but when you look at it, it almost become like a fix, I suppose, to kind of, that was making me feel better about myself. And drink was fun for a bit, but I got to be honest, like, sitting here now, I can't recall the last time drink was ever fun.
So it was fun to make you feel better about yourself and to socialise with your mates, but then got to the point where it wasn't anymore.
Yeah. It was just like the Saturday night thing, the Friday night thing, what you do, And then I remember waking up face down on the field one night after drinking Nuki Brown, and that wasn't good.
Better than Advocar.
yeah, it's better than Advocar. And at 21, I remember, like, I was in the hospital with the drip thing in my arm, that again, not really remembering anything that had gone on. I was a crap drinker, really. I remember talking to a counsellor years later, and she just said to me, "Have you ever thought you're not very good at it?" And I went, "Well, yeah, I get." And I'd always tried to drink like my mate, who was probably about 6 foot, and maybe he could handle it a bit more, and I just assumed that I could be the same as somebody else. I
always thought I was good at it. I almost used to put it on my CV. The jobs, bad at golf, not very good at football, but hey, could this boy drink?
I couldn't, Dave.
No.
Drink.
So, as that progressed, when did you realise that you were maybe drinking more than your pals, and it was becoming a bit of a problem?
I think I realised it when I'd need a drink before a drink. That it was coming to that point. It was coming to, every time we'd start to go out on an evening, I'd be getting quite anxious, and I started to notice physical things, like I'd get shakes in my hands, and the one that I noticed more than any other thing else, I used to get a shake down my neck, right down my neck, and my head would start to kind of, I'd feel like my head would start to like do that bit of a wobble thing. And it scared me, to be honest. But again, the only thing I thought was, well, when I have a drink, it doesn't do it. Simple medication, isn't it, really? So I'd start to drink before going out. But I'd start to drink like a couple more beers than anybody else. Then I'd start to drink anything, really, that I thought. I remember drinking like bottles of martini and stuff like that before going out. And then it'd be like wine. And it was just the feeling of the anaesthetic, I suppose, what it was.
Just,
to be able to... Speaking to any of my friends, none of my friends would have said, Marcus has got a problem with drink. They would have just thought, well, because I'd be getting to a level of, I was just okay on it.
Yeah.
It was becoming very functional. It was becoming very, like I say, anaesthetical, very medicinal in the way it was working. So I'd get into the pub and I'd drink less when I was out than anybody else would. So to anybody on the outside, it was like, well, Marcus don't really drink a great
But
deal.
you drink before you go out, drink when you're out, and drink when you go home.
To be honest, Dave, I didn't drink when I got home. I only did it for the social aspect.
Yeah.
I drank just to be part of, and I didn't enjoy it. It was, I felt like it was part of what you had to do, particularly as a adolescent. Do you know, going out and, you know, for me, having a relationship and trying to work were the two important things at that point, and the fear of everything else. It gradually got worse and worse and worse up until the point of about the age of 25, 26, when I decided to go travelling. You know, because that in itself was supposed to be like this 12 months of discovery. And all it ended up being really was confirming the fact that I'd seriously got a problem with alcohol.
Right.
Because I was out of my own environment around India and Malaysia and all that, and Australia particularly was a awful time, really. I just felt like I wanted to kill myself, like I didn't want to live this life anymore. Like, you know, I remember keeping this journal of how I was feeling on a day-to-day basis, and I was sat in this hostel in Sydney, in King's Cross, and I just wanted to end it all, really. I was drinking, throwing it up, drinking again, just to get out.
Right.
And it was just an horrendous time. I had just no appreciation of what was going on in my life.
No. Right, I think we're ready for your first record.
First record, yeah. Paolo Nutini. So is there a reason why... Well, there's always a reason why you pick music. So is there a reason for this one?
Yeah,
Other than he's a fantastic singer and he writes Boston songs. So.
He does, Boston. It's fantastic. I just the whole tune of it, really. And I think the Candy thing is like, it can attribute to anything, really. And I suppose I just listen to the words quite a lot. I love Paolo Nutini as an artist, and I could have picked about 10 of his songs, to be honest. But this one, for me, just every time I put it on, it just does something to me, really. So there is...
Does it? I mean, is it the same as anybody, where the song or the words or something lock into a particular time of your life, or
Yeah, I think...
is it more general than that?
I think relationship-wise and stuff like that, you know, I'd say I'm a bit of a old romantic, really. And there's some strong metaphors within the song, really. And I guess, and the bits at the beginning are kind of like, I was perched outside in the pouring rain, trying to make myself a sail and all that. And for me, there's like, it's a strong metaphor for some of life, really.
Yeah, great. Let's have a listen.
Thanks, man.
Right, mate.
I was perched outside in the pouring rain, trying to make myself a sail. Then I'll float to you, my darling, with the evening on my tail. Although not the most honest means of travel, it gets me there nonetheless. I'm a heartless man at worst, babe, and a helpless one at best. Darling, I'll bathe your skin, I'll even wash your clothes. Just give me some candy before I go. No, darling, I'll kiss your eyes and lay you down on your rug. Just give me some candy after my hug. But the hurt plays out all the same. And although I'm left defeated, it gets held against my name. I know you got plenty to offer, baby, but I guess I've taken quite enough. While I'm some stain there on your bedsheet, you're my diamond in the rough. Darling, I'll bathe your skin, I'll even wash your clothes. Just give me some candy before I go. No, candy after my heart. I know that the writing's on the wall, but darling, I'll bathe your skin, I'll even wash your clothes. Just give me some candy after my I'll go, and I'll be there waiting for you. Know that I'll be there waiting for you. Oh, 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 I'll be there waiting for you.
The best in news, views and debate. The best in local music and sport. Black Country Radio. It's all about you.
Thanks for that, Billy. Nice choice of songs there, Marcus. So just before we broke for the song, you were in Australia feeling suicidal, I guess, was yeah. So
What a fantastic place to be.
Yeah.
I've lived in Australia for a short time, and yeah, it's a big drinking culture. So yeah, it's lovely country, but yeah.
Yeah, like I kind of thought it would be, because me and my friend, we planned this trip out, and we said, I mean, I did it again because a girlfriend I was with at the time, we split. She went off to Worcester University, and I thought to myself, I need to do something. I got this job. I was working in a warehouse, and I think I was a supervisor or team leader or something like that. And I thought, you know, I need to do something. And I'd never had the courage to go to university, confidence or anything else. Mm-hmm. And because I was always worried about the drink, I guess, I was always worried about mixing. And it's a strange concept sometimes, because I love spending time around people. I love people, but I just felt so anxious around them all the time, and I felt like I couldn't be myself. So we did this thing, and we bought this ticket for £999. We had about 15 flights on it, and we flew into Bombay at the time. Wonderful month in India, and then through Malaysia, and then down to Singapore, Bali, and then I remember landing in Darwin in Australia, and I'd gone from like the drink really at the time. I mean, it felt like it was all right to drink at 7-8 o'clock in Bali, because nobody cared. But when you get to Darwin, it was almost like, oh my God, it's a bit like being in England again. And all of a sudden, I'm trying to sneak drink at that point, buying boxes of wine and stuff like that. And the box of wine's always a classic, isn't it? Because no one can see how much is going down. And it just became part and parcel. And then we went on to Cairns. I spent about 6 weeks in Cairns, and I bought a camper van, and trailed down through like into the outback, Ayers Rock and Broken Hill and all that. And I gotta be honest, I loved that part of Australia. I loved it because there was no pressure. What everybody was seemingly doing is like heading down to Sydney or Melbourne and getting a job. Well, that was the furthest thing from my mind, really. Like, you know, again, and I was spending, getting into debt, and it was all around drink. Do you know? It turned into, although there were some beautiful moments there, I just felt like there was such a pressure to do something, and I never considered coming home early. The ticket was, you know, planned onto New Zealand, and that New Zealand was horrendous as well. I just remember the drinking was getting really, really bad, and I was passing like the bottle shops and stuff like that, and feeling like I just needed to get more drink in me all the time. I got robbed in Christchurch because I went drinking with this bloke and decided it was a good idea to stick flaming drambues on your chest, you know, as you do. and woke up and there was about the money that I'd got for the van that I'd sold in Sydney was in my wallet, and it got in it, and it was gone. Yeah. And things just got worse. The only time I ever felt any good about myself was when I met a girl, and that was the fixing again.
So was that your rock bottom, as we call it? Was that when you decided that, hey, I need to do something about this? Or?
Well, I got back from in February 2000. I got back and I went to see the doctor because the shaking thing was just getting out of control.
Right.
Doctor prescribed me. He advised that I took Prozac, and I was like, I don't think I need that. And he said I was depressed, and I get in and I was like, no, I'm not depressed. There's me, like, just self-medicating and trying to tell him what what was best. And I never did anything about it. I went back to work. It took me about 5 months. I went back to work, but I was drinking more and more on the evening. Work got me back into a routine of like stopping drinking. I got into a relationship again because I thought it would help, and it obviously it didn't. She was kind of like quite toxic, and the relationship was toxic, and she was a drinker as well, and that obviously didn't help matters. And it took me all in all quite a few years, Dave, to be honest, before I found some help in AA.
Oh, okay.
So
did you try anything else? I mean, obviously the doctors sometimes refer you to counsellors or Aquarius or people where you cut down and try and control it rather than AA, which is abstinence. Yeah.
I went to see a counsellor. I found it a little bit helpful. I just don't think I was not ready. No. Yeah. And when I went back to I think it took me. I went to Aquarius in 2010. So this is like 10 years after getting back from travelling. Because I got married in 2005. And it was wonderful. The wedding was wonderful. We went out to Penang and got married, and everything was like perfect, really, at the time. But I remember even on my wedding day, I drank like 3/4 of a bottle of vodka. But I recall everything about the day. I don't remember. I was not an alcoholic who liked being out of control. All it was doing was soothing my anxiety all the time. And wedding day was fantastic. But my wife caught me drinking one day at home. We got a lovely house together. We both got good jobs, and I was maintaining the lifestyle. Do you know? And she walked into the garage one morning, 7:30 on a Saturday morning. I was drinking a can of Stella. Do you know? And I'd got this running machine in the garage, and we got the tumble dryer and that in the garage. So there's always an excuse for me to be in the garage. I'd either be doing the clothes drying, or I'd be on the running machine. Yeah. But really, do you know, when she walked in and there was a look of, what are you doing? At 7:30 on a Saturday morning, drinking, and all that. I suppose it changed the way we were, because it changed my strategy around my drinking. I wasn't going to stop, but she'd start to notice things, and I'd try and change the drinking, and I'd try and do it in different places and all that kind of stuff. And we agreed that I sat down with my mum and my dad and my brother and my wife at the time, and I said, I've got a problem with drink. They were all shocked, except for my wife. So we arranged to go to Aquarius. I saw this lovely woman there, and she gave me a few tips on what to do. And we went to my first AA meeting in 2010 in Briley Hill, up at the health centre, on a Sunday night. And I know now, Dave, I only went because she wanted me to go. I didn't really want to go. Do you know, I thought I'd always be able to manage this drinking. I thought this was what I did to get through things. I didn't think that it would catch up with me. I didn't think things would get worse. And we sat in that meeting, and I listened to all the people's differences, none of the similarities. This one guy was talking about domestic violence and how he'd strangled his wife until she turned blue. And I thought, I've not done anything like that. And my wife was sat next to me, and at the end of the meeting she went, you don't need to come back. You've just got a bad habit, and we'll sort it together. That was all I needed to hear, really.
And away you go again.
And with the help of Aquarius, do you know, they said you can do a home detox. I did a home detox, and this lovely nurse came round and gave me Librium. I thought, this is fantastic. Do you know, this is the answer. Don't need to drink ever again. Floating round on this Librium cloud, but of course it wears off, and there was no program, and having that, I suppose what AA did was it kind of planted a seed for me. I knew that there was something, but I didn't understand what all the steps and all that stuff was about.
Yeah, it's quite daunting, I think, initially when you come in, isn't it?
It is, and they asked me to come back to a second meeting. I think I told my wife I was going back to a second meeting, but I never did. And the guys gave me numbers and stuff like that, but I had no intention of really phoning anybody up. So work. I applied a lot of time into work, and if anything, I was probably becoming a workaholic. If anything else, I would spend a lot of time at work, but then I'd feel inferior when I got home, because I was then manager then of this 60 people within this department. We were running this logistics operation, and it was so busy, and that used to fix me, I suppose, Dave.
Yeah. Okay, so when you first went, you didn't want to be there. What made you decide that, hey, I need this now?
And I think really because I got to a point of I suppose the old adage of I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. Really, I went back to AA when the marriage broke down,
right?
Because I needed something. Things were getting worse. I went back to. I remember being at the Kidderminster meeting and people saying to me I needed a sponsor, and I remember that Ian, and I remember asking Ian to be my sponsor at the time, and he, bless him, and he said he'd never been asked before, and we sat together, and
bless him.
I went through it with him, and I went out to his place and we did a bit of step work together, but I was still struggling on the drink, and then I got pulled over for drink driving in March 2015, and I've been in hospital for drinking too much. I was in Russell's Hall. I went back twice to Russell's Hall for detoxes, and then the third time I thought I can't go back. I remember one of the nurses saying to me, "Well, what's your problem then?" So I went, "Well, I've got problems with alcohol." She went, "You don't look like an alcoholic." I was like, "Oh, I don't know what that means really."
What do they look like?
Yeah. And I think the shocking thing was there was a guy in a bed next to me, and he was only a young guy, and he was yellow as anything, and he came out and he was walking like he was about 90, and he was trying to get to the toilet, and I remember saying to the nurse, "What's the matter with him?" And she just went, "Oh, he's an alcoholic." And the shock of it all really was like, really? That does yet to people, you know what I mean? And here's me just thinking, "Oh, I'll be all right. I'll wake up one morning, I'll be all right," you know. Well, it wasn't to be, and I suppose from that point on, I remember Ian said to me at the time, somebody had mentioned about rehabs, and I thought rehabs were only for football stars.
Yeah, wealthy people.
Yeah, and I didn't think it was available to someone like myself. But I've got to be honest that when I sat back in AA the second time, I thought, this sounds like hard work, this does. I don't know about you, I'm not really keen on hard work as an alcoholic. And I thought, there's a rehab, I wonder if that could sort it, So I got this money from the divorce and stuff like that, and I thought, well, maybe I'll use the money for that, and my family were always very supportive. And I just felt like I couldn't get it. I relapsed after 2 months, because people said don't get into a relationship. I thought, what do you know? Get in a relationship, That didn't go well, obviously. And Ian knew this. He's got some friends who
ran a rehab, didn't they?
Yeah, down in Northampton, and I went there, and he left me there. And I remember sitting there on the end of the bed with a copy of the Daily Reflections. And I was 42, and I was like a kid who's primary school for the first day when your mum leaves you, I was in tears thinking, what the hell's this come to, Just, what am I going to do here? But I suppose the overriding thing is, and that, that was my last drink, on June. Yeah, I've got it on here somewhere. They have to look at that to just remember that.
He's got it tattooed on his arm.
Yeah,
22nd
of June,
2015.
Yeah, and that was my last can of, when I was in the rehab, it wasn't a 12-step rehab, but there there was a big association with identification between others.
Yeah.
There was an opportunity to be honest with yourself, which was something I just couldn't be at that point, you know. And they talked about aspects like we've just been talking about the past history and what it meant, and working that and talking about it with somebody, sharing it with other addicts, you know, whether it be cocaine addicts, heroin addicts, gambling addicts, whatever. There was someone with solvent abuse as well, do you know. But it was all about fixing, wasn't it? And it was all about what we did to kind of make ourselves kind of almost, for me, fit in with everybody else in society. So I spent 6 weeks there, and it was the best 6 weeks in my life.
So it gave you a kickstart.
It did.
Yeah, and
it
that's
did.
the key, isn't it, to rehab? I mean, it's ultimately you've got to want it, and you need to get with AA, but it just kickstarts a lot of people.
Got off the treadmill as well, do you know?
Yeah.
Because within that environment, I honestly don't think I'd have ever got it. And fair play to, I listen to people in AA who go for the first time and they never take another drink.
Yeah.
You know, that wasn't my journey.
I know.
I spent 6 weeks there, and then Ian said to me on the weekend before I left, he said, you've got to do 90 meetings in 90 days. I remember thinking, really, do I have to do that? And he said, just do it. And I did it, and I was loving the meetings. It was so different in terms of, I did more than what was, you know, the 90, because I was enjoying it that much. You do 2 meetings a day, 3 meetings on a Sunday maybe. Do you know, there's a couple of people who I'm still close with now who have really, really helpful in getting you to share, getting you to read in a meeting. Do you know, because my anxiety told me that I couldn't do that. But through repetition, how the support of others, do you know, it was just...
And you feel safe, don't you, in a meeting? Well, for me, you feel safe in the meeting, and everybody understands you, because everybody in the room are alcoholics, and they've all been there, done it.
Yeah.
Got the T-shirt, you know, maybe to a greater or lesser degree than you, but, you know, they understand, so it's that sense of belonging that's good. So, yeah, my next question was, how long is it since your last drink? But you've got it tattooed on your arm.
Yeah.
So, did you ever think that you'd, you know, in the early days that you'd get to be, what's that, 7 years? 7 and a bit years.
Yeah,
sober?
7 and a bit years. Did I? No. When I was lying in the bed in early 2015, having, you know, split up from my wife and lost my job and nearly lost my licence, and I'm facing my 3rd detox in the hospital with a can of cider at the side of the bed, and not knowing whether it was like 5 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock in an evening. You know, legs kept giving way every time you tried to make your way down the stairs. Honestly, Dave, no. I never thought I'd be sat here doing the things that, you know, that the last 7.5 years have provided me with, really. It's a miracle, isn't it?
Miracle. Yeah, well done, mate. I think we're ready for your next record now.
Yeah, good choice. The Boss, Thunder Road. So, yeah. Tell us about Bruce Springsteen. I could talk for like weeks about Bruce Springsteen. So,
well, he's a storyteller, isn't he? Do you know what I mean? And the whole aspect of the lyrics and stuff like that. Do you know, I remember like maybe the mid '80s when I think my mum and dad bought a cassette tape of Born in the USA.
Oh yeah.
And you know, even those songs were catchy and everything at the time, but when I realised that really wasn't what Bruce Springsteen was about, and you listen to the stories after, like the records on Nebraska and Born to Run, like Thunder Road, I listened to there's an acoustic version of an unplugged set that he did, and like I know every single word of that song. I think it's just such a beautiful, freeing song about life and about, you know, relationships again, and just, you know, the free-spirited nature, because one of the hardest things, I suppose, for me about being a alcoholic is almost like that free-spirited nature of, you know, it's very hard to feel tied down by anything, you know, to try and format and be part of a structure that says you must be this way. I suppose listening to some of Bruce Springsteen's songs just allowed me that headspace.
He's only got out. I've only got to open his gob, and that's it for me. So. Let's listen to Bruce Springsteen and Thunder Road.
The screen door slams, Mary's dress waves. Like a vision she dances across the porch as the radio plays. Roy Orbison singing for the lonely. Hey, that's me and I want you only. Don't turn me home again, I just can't face myself alone again. Don't run back inside, darling, you know just what I'm here for. So you're scared and you're thinking that maybe we ain't that young anymore. Show a little faith, there's magic in the night. You ain't a beauty, but hey, you're alright. Oh, and that's alright with me. You can hide neath your covers and study your pain. Make crosses from your lovers, the roses and the rain. Waste your summer praying in vain for a savior to rise from these streets. Well, now I know you're all that's understood. Or addiction knocking off a girl's beneath this dirty hood. With a chance to make it good somehow. Hey, what else can we do now? Except roll down the window and let the wind blow back your hair. Well, the night's busted open, these two lanes will take us anywhere. We got one last chance to make it real, to trade in these wings on some wheels. Climbing back heavens, waiting down all the tracks. Oh, come take my hand, we're riding out tonight to case the promised land. Oh, thunder road, oh, thunder road, oh, thunder road. Lying out there like a killer in the sun. Hey, I know it's late, we can't make it, we run. Oh, thunder road, sit tight, take hold, thunder road. Well, I got this guitar and I learned how to make it tall. And my car's out back if you're ready to take that long walk. From your front porch to my home seat, the door's open but the ride ain't free. And I know you're lonely for words that I ain't spoken. Tonight won't be free, all the promises will be broken. I will ghost in the eyes of all the boys you sent away. They haunt this dusty beach road and the skeleton frames of burned out Chevrolets. They scream your name at night in the street. Your graduation gown lies in rags at their feet. And the lonely cool before dawn. You hear the engines roaring on. When you get to the porch, they're gone on the way. So Mary climbing. It's a town full of losers, pulling out of here to win.
Thanks for that, Billy. Another great track, Marcus. Thanks for that. Before we get back into it, can I ask Dec to cover the contact details for those that are listening out there, how they can get in touch with AA?
Can indeed, Dave, yeah. There's various ways to contact us at AA. If you go on to the alcoholics-anonymous.org.uk website, obviously that'll take you to the homepage, and there you can get bundles of information. You've got the free phone number, which is 0800 9177 650. That's 0800 9177 650. You can always contact us as well on help@aamail.org. If you're looking for a meeting, if you feel that you have sort of dropped down a bit too much, you can go to a meeting. If you type in your postcode and the day of the week, it'll tell you all the meetings that are close to you in that area. And there is one other way you can get us, which is the online chat, where you can just, if you don't want to talk to somebody direct, you can just type to them if you're just not feeling up for a chat, and they will help you as well. And that's it all.
That's great, Dec. Thanks for that. Okay, Marcus, we've got you. You're out of rehab. Can you tell us how your life has changed since you got sober?
Yeah. I mean, it's just totally different, isn't it? You know, just one of the main things I found at first was obviously there was still that anxiety, and walking out the rehab, I never felt a sense of fear around it. I remember going to a secondary care place in Birmingham because I was scared of that, making that transition from being in that rehab bubble to being in society again.
Living life,
Yeah, and I remember the guy who was one of the main people at that rehab. He told me that if I didn't join, then I'd drink again, and it really it got my back up a bit, really, because it kind of inspired me not to drink, if anything else. I went back to I didn't go to that secondary care place because I got an impression that it wasn't about care, it was more about finances, which you encounter. And then I went to Atlantic House in Stourbridge Line, and I joined some groups there, and I met a couple of friends. Well, one in particular who's a good mate still today, who's sober about the same time as me. He's 2 months behind me, and he's never going to catch me up. He thinks he might, but it's been great, and we formed a really, really great friendship. And I'd got AA, and I got Ian, and I started to venture out to meetings. I kept my licence by the skin of my teeth, which I'm thank God for, because that granted me the independence to be able to go and do things. You know, I'd go to meetings, and I remember we was at a meeting in Evesham, and I met a guy who was also has been really fundamental to my growth, my recovery growth. You go out there, you do a main share, then you'd go somewhere else and do a share. And me and a couple of the other lads who I met, Brian in particular is a big part of my recovery, a wonderful man. And we went out over to Wales on a AA day trip, ended up in a meeting in Wrexham, which was fantastic. And then I get everywhere at one point, we'd be going up to, went to Liverpool one Sunday to do 2 meetings. And it was all about, joking aside, wanting to hear different messages. Yeah. And I thought the message would be a bit harsher in Liverpool. I've got to be honest, I couldn't really understand half of it.
Hey.
We was at a meeting right by Anfield. And there was this one guy that was talking about Fazachli or something. But it was great. There was 2 they were both powerful meetings, to be fair. Yeah. And then, just AA for me has just opened up my world completely, in terms of I couldn't walk into a room without being scared of what people thought of me. Yeah. So for me, the whole thing about getting sober has been about challenging myself. Yeah. So I've been able to I've been to meetings up in Edinburgh, up in down in Penzance, down Cornwall and all that, Safe Coast, and we went to Toronto once, walked into a meeting there thinking it was an AA meeting. It was actually a Sex Addicts Anonymous meeting, but these things happen.
And how did you relate to that, Marcus?
Well, I didn't really. It was ever so funny because we were all sat in a circle, and I was at the end of the circle as such, because we walked in. First person, my name's John, I'm a sex addict. I was thinking, well, maybe it's a mixed meeting. But by the 5th person, kind of realised we were in the wrong place. And the strange thing was, I mean, 99% of it was men as well, and I got my partner with me at the time in the meeting. I think she was hoping for something a bit more juicy, but it never really came out. But yeah, and as silly as it sounds again, but being in that meeting, I mean, I've been to one of their meetings since. I was working down in. I had to go to Westminster one day for the organisation I'm working with, and it was a bit of time before the train came, and I needed to get to a meeting, and there was an SA meeting there. And I'll be honest, Dave, it's one of the most powerful things I've ever experienced. When you're sober, and you haven't got the drink to hide behind with all the problems that you created in your life before, all of a sudden you're raw, it's exposed, and listening to these guys share that, and you can relate, and the obsession about things, I've been to CA meetings with friends, and substance has never been a problem for me. Gambling hasn't been a problem for me, but I can relate to things that
it's
people
that
have
addiction,
used.
isn't it?
Yeah,
The feelings are the same, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Whether it is sex or food or gambling or alcohol, it's the same. Yeah.
And Amazon.
And Amazon. I have had. Yeah, I do know somebody who's a bit prone to that. Internet shopping. So your life has improved beyond all recognition.
I met a ex-professional boxer, and he said to me about doing some training, and I did that with him, and I found that was really helpful at the time. The guy who's sponsoring me today, I went out to Africa with him to Sierra Leone, and we did some charity work out there, and I was only sober for probably about 9 months, and it was huge, and all these steps and these people that you meet throughout your life. I'm a dad today, and I put myself through university. I was able to go back and do that, and I could finish something. I couldn't finish anything, and there's the people that you meet, Dave, the different people that are in my life today. This AA gives you such a whole support network, it allows me to work. I work in mental health, drug and alcohol support, and I'll probably try and get Billy to do a bit of a plug on a different point.
Certainly, you can come and talk about that anytime.
Thank you. And it's a project, within Wolverhampton, helping people, and every single day I get to feel why I do what I'm doing, for why I'm staying sober for. There's difficult parts some days, COVID, when COVID happened, fear. All of a sudden, I was in the last 3 months of my university degree, and we've got to stay at home, and I've got the little one at home, with his mum, and we're all together, and it's like that fear can still take over so easily, and I don't think about having a drink, but I know that having a drink sometimes would alleviate all that.
Sure.
It would shut that noise off. Yeah. But you pick up the phone, you talk to people. And again, it takes it away.
That support network, isn't it? It's fantastic. The fellowship and the love and the care that you get is just miraculous, really, for me.
Absolutely.
So, you're living proof that there is a satisfying and enjoyable life after drinking. What would you say to people that are maybe sat at home listening to this and thinking, "Ooh, yeah, maybe I can relate to that. Maybe I drink a bit too much." What would you say to them?
Well, I'd say get in touch with. There's so many meetings around. I mean, you can pick up the phone to the AA helpline, which, and I did some work on the AA helpline myself, and I know that how important it can be, and I know that there's so many people who still do work on that. And that first point of contact, even if you don't get something from it the first time, I suppose from my own experience, I'd like to advise that you don't leave it so long in between. I mean, it was 5 years for me between that first meeting and going back to AA. But that was just my journey, But I know that the seed was planted, and I just get in touch and talk to somebody about your drinking. I know it's hard these days, particularly with a GP. Some big GPs though, and I've always been a big advocate of getting support and keep asking for support if you need it. Because I had to keep knocking on the door of the doctors, and the doctor in the end became very supportive. I got counselling through the doctors, which was massively supportive. And there are more than there's a lot of avenues available,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
you've just got to have
You've just got to have that desire to...
the willingness,
Yeah, and recognise that maybe you have got a problem and give it a go.
because you
Give it
can
a go.
lose everything, can't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been around 7 and a bit years now. Then you're still coming to meetings.
Yeah.
You're not fixed. You're not cured yet. Then.
No, well, it's a hard thing because I suppose it's just life's just different in terms of I'll never be, even though it's not about the drink anymore. It's about living, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's about living in this world with a head that can get
Yeah.
a bit off centre sometimes.
Yeah.
Meetings, I need
Keep on coming
meetings.
back, mate. I think we're about at the end of it now. Marcus, thanks ever so much for coming along.
Thanks,
mate.
Anytime.
Marcus.
Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the get across the kiddie sometimes and see us
I will.
across there. It'd be lovely.
Cheers, Dave.
Thanks once.
Going
again.
out with Dean Martin, so that's a bit different from Bruce Springsteen.
I
Where did he
know.
come from?
It just puts a smile on my face, Billy. To be honest, I remember we did a skydive in Australia, and there was a guy who I was with, and he kept banging on about Dean Martin, and I was I'll listen to it then. And every time I listen to it, it just
It's
makes
great,
me
isn't
smile.
it? Yeah, been an absolute pleasure as
Thanks, Billy.
always. And we'll have a chat about doing something for your other stuff. So
Thanks, Billy.
we'll be back in a couple of weeks with another guest, but we're going to go out with Dean Martin and Gentle on My Mind.
It's all about you. Black Country Extra.
It's knowing that your door is always open and your path is free to walk. That makes me tend to leave my sleeping bag rolled up and stashed behind your couch. And it's knowing I'm not shackled by forgotten words and bonds and the ink stains that have dried up on some lines. Keeps you in the back roads by the rivers of my memory. Keeps you ever gentle on my mind. It's not clinging to the rocks and ivy planted on the columns now that binds me. Or something that somebody said because they thought we fit together walking. It's just knowing that the world will not be cursing nor forgiving when I walk along some railroad track and find moving on the back roads by the rivers of my memory, and for hours you're just gentle on my mind. Well, I dip my cup of soup back from the gurgling, crackling cauldron in some train yard. My beard a roughened coal pile and a dirty hat pulled low across my face. Cup hands round a tin can, I pretend I'll hold you to my breast and find that you're waving from the black road by the river of my memory, ever smiling, ever gentle on my mind.